Grew up in South Metro, Savage. Yeah. I live in Egan now. Okay. Been married for 21 years. My wife has put up with me for that long. I have 5 kids. So I have a senior in high school, a sophomore, 8th grade, 6th grade, 2nd grade. My oldest 2 are girls. My youngest 3 are boys.
What's their names?
Isabel's my oldest. She's my fiercely independent child. Then I have Greta, Davis, Layton, and Levi. So I have 4 playing, 1 playing high school soccer right now, 4 playing traveling soccer. Actually, the reason I started Hammerheads was I actually was a youth pastor for a long time. And I would sit in staff meetings, I would sit in meetings with other youth pastors, and it was consistent. Sports are out of perspective, sports are out of control. And this is 20 years ago, and I would say yes, but it's not going to change, so how can we impact it? And so my idea, I had always had this passion for 4 things: faith, family, sports, and music. And I'm really passionate about all of those things, and I love sports. And so it's like, how can we get involved in sports and put it in perspective? And so that's kind of where Hammerheads was meant to be a club where you could show that you can be competitive, but at the same time keeping things in perspective. As you get to know me, you'll hear me say this over and over and over. Volleyball's a game. It's just a game, but it's a game that we play with passion. So we're not going to just, have you spend all this money because sports are expensive and let's just have fun. When you're getting crushed, it's not fun. And so you're going to work hard, you're going to be dedicated, you're going to give it to your all, but at the end of the day, it's a game. And I'm more concerned with the relationships that they're building with each other and the qualities they're learning throughout the sport than necessarily the success that will come along with it. As a club, in addition to volleyball, we do things like a food drive. We do a couple times a year, our whole club, their parents, their siblings can come. We do an event with Feed My Starving Children where they pack food that goes all over.
That's really cool.
Things like that. We've had teams sponsor kids through Compassion International so that they can see things going on throughout the world. And so just little things like that, and those types of things are optional for families so that they don't feel like they have to do that stuff, because I realize how much families have going on and I don't want to take away from that family time, but just trying to get them to see like, hey, it's bigger than just the sport. And I think sometimes as being a club director, a coach, a parent, and having played, it's so easy to kind of get just sucked in where your sport just becomes all consuming and it's hard. So well, the club officially started, I actually bought the name for Hammerheads way back in 1995, before I actually ever even met my wife.
Wow.
And so the club actually started in 2006, and I really wanted to have that family feel, so I wanted to apply all the business principles of no advertising, just word of mouth, and I wanted to start slow. And so so at the time, and I wanted to show that I was really about being involved in the community as well. And so at the time I was the varsity assistant at Rosemount High School for their volleyball team for 8 years. And then I also coached for Rosemount JO and had Hammerheads. And so I wanted to build it slow. And so those first few years we had one team, then we went to 2, then we went to 3, 5, and then we bounced to 10. And now we're at 16 teams. We mostly focus on 15s through 18s. I never wanted to go younger than that because I encourage kids to stay at their local programs where they're young, save money, save travel, all those kind of things. Unfortunately, some of the local clubs too now have kind of gotten things out of perspective, and so I had a group of moms come to me one year and say, and their daughters were in 7th grade, would you start a 13s team, and I said no, and they explained what was going on with their local club, and I said, if things are still bad next year, come back to me and tell me, give it one more year. And they all did come back the next year, and so that's when I launched 14s.
Okay.
And we've had that this will be our 9th year of 14s, but we've stayed consistent of, we haven't done anything with elementary school kids or anything like that, because I want them to build those friendships with the kids they go to school with.
Right.
And once you get into the club stuff, then all your friends are scattered all over the place. Right. I think it is, because when you brought back the connection thing, I really think the players want to be a part of the high school team for being connected to their school.
Right.
Unfortunately, I feel like high school coaches and club coaches, we've pushed winning so much that there's so many high school coaches that are trying to run their high schools like Division I programs. And so the biggest change I've seen over the last 15 years is the number of 7th and 8th graders getting pulled into JV, varsity, 10th grade teams. And really, as long as the club season is, they don't need it because it's not really going to benefit them that much. And it's frustrating because and it's just my perspective, but I think for me, if you're and I'm talking bigger schools, if you go to a small school in the middle of nowhere, of course you need younger players. When you have schools of 2,000 to 4,000 kids, numbers shouldn't be an issue where you would need junior high kids. And so to me, varsity teams, and I think the girls would agree if you ask them, varsity teams should be mostly juniors and seniors with an occasional crazy good 9th or 10th grader.
Yeah.
JV should be 10th and 11th graders with maybe a crazy good 9th grader.
Yeah.
10th grade should be 10th grade, and 9A and 9B should be 9th grade. And I think it would keep girls connected more to the sport. I think if you talk to club directors around the area, most of them are seeing a huge drop-off in the number of 17s and 18s playing. And I think the reason for that is more kids, by the time they hit 10th grade, see the writing on the wall of, I'm never going to play varsity, so therefore let's quit.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, then they quit JO too, because as much as parents are being well-intentioned, a lot of parents get sucked into the whole, it's either making varsity or it's either getting a college scholarship.
Right.
And so they're like, well, why am I going to pay all this money for you to play club if you're not going to play high school?
Right.
And I think we're missing that it's really about them being connected.
Yeah.
And, and we see all the statistics. When you're connected, when you're involved in things, it keeps you out of trouble. And as a parent of 5, I would like my kids to stay out of trouble. Volleyball for life is the tagline for USAVolleyball.
Right.
And unfortunately, what we get caught in doing as coaches in high school and club is we're not teaching volleyball for life. We're teaching, here's what you need to do to please your high school coach, or here's what you need to do to try to get to college. And so unfortunately, sometimes it's not what's best for the athlete, and we're really not fully educating, because when we say college, almost any kid could play a sport in college. There's club teams, there's rec leagues, there's all those kind of things, and a lot of them sometimes don't have the pressure of actually playing in college. And so we want to teach them that, hey, don't give up on the sport. And so by making the focus so much on about making varsity or getting a college scholarship, what happens is these kids never stop playing ever, and their bodies aren't resting, and we're seeing more and more and more of, my goal is when an athlete leaves Hammerheads, that when they're 25, I don't see them in a shoulder sling or limping because they've had so many overuse injuries. And so what we're doing when we have these kids play so young and push them so hard so young is that they're really, in a sense, peaking at like 9th, 10th grade, or deciding what they're going to do by 9th, 10th grade, when really we should be training them so that they're peaking kind of between 18 to like 25. Should be when they're playing at their highest level, not having all these overuse injuries. So my advice to coaches is just, take a deep breath. Remember, it's at the end of the day, it's a game.
Yeah.
And it's about the kids. It's not about us. And at the end of the day, whether if you're coaching high school, you know, we have 3 classes. 3 teams are winning state. Mm-hmm. Does that mean everyone else failed? And unfortunately, I've known players that have won state championships, and they have nothing positive to say about their high school volleyball career. And to me, that's sad that that's the situation kids get into. This should be sports to me. And yes, again, it's not just show up, do whatever you want, but sports should be a stress release. It should be, if you had a bad day at school, you can go to practice and you can hit the ball and you can kind of vent to your friends and your teammates and let things out, and kind of get that support of, like, you know, like, or if things are bad at home, they come and like, my dad's a jerk, and it's like, I'm sorry you had a bad day, you know, it's still your dad, you need to honor him, let's play some volleyball. And that they leave working up a sweat, not they come and now they're even more stressed out than before. Sometimes I laugh because coaching high school, coaches would get so mad because they think players are lazy. Look at her, she never, and I'm like, okay, do you really think that these 2 junior girls in high school were on their way to practice and they were like, hey, wait till Hack tells me to transition because I'm totally not going to do it. Watch how mad he gets. Yeah. No, it's just not a discipline yet. And it's the same as parenting. I mean, as a parent, I'm sure you've said, how many times do I have to tell you to pick up your shoes in the entryway? They're not disciplined, and so you have to do it over and over and over. And some of these players, when they're playing in college or when they're coaching their own kids, all of a sudden it will click like, oh, now I see what my coach was talking about. But they're kids, and so it just doesn't click in. Yeah, it's actually really fun. Is now, I would say, a good number of my coaches are players that played for me in high school and or club that have now gone through college and come back to coach, and they've kind of like see how it is and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think of one girl in particular that she was always on a 1s team. Or last year she dropped to a 2s team, and now she kind of sees like, hey, I didn't necessarily put the work in that I should have, and so you know, it was a little strenuous there with some of the relationships with things of, you know. Yeah. Honestly, I think with Laura Bush taking over in the region, I think so many of the things that I've wanted to see I'm beginning to see. And previous people that worked here, I had great relationships with, a lot of respect for them, a lot of respect for the amount of hours and time they put in towards the sport. But I think, you know, there's always times when you have governing bodies. I think right now, sometimes when you have a governing body, sometimes it's easy to get off track sometimes. But I always say it's always better to be under authority than to have no authority. Right. And so there were things that were happening that I don't think were best for our region. Okay. And there was such a focus on the national level, and so much of, as club directors, it was kind of like, what are we getting back for the amount of money we're putting in towards the region? Is it all going to nationals? What's coming here? Right. And I think there's some just simple things of just getting more involved with recognizing what athletes are doing and things like that, because it's so easy to just put on websites when you have players that make a national team and things like that, and to showcase the elite of the elite, which is incredible, and those girls deserve to be recognized. But there's such a small fraction of the number of girls that play. And so even simple things like having an all-region team, having an all-tournament team for President's Day, where for a lot of people think, well, what does it really do? Does it really mean anything? To the kids and those families, it means a lot. Maybe it's the encouragement that they get that, hey, we're playing in lower level, silver division of President's Day. But for that kid, they made all tournament team and they got a t-shirt, and maybe that helps them to not give up on the sport. And I would say one thing at a national level which would help is, you mentioned you had soccer players and basketball players. In most other sports, there's A, B, C, or there's C1, C2, C3. And so every time you go into a tournament and things like that, you're going to play with teams of similar ability.
Right.
Where with volleyball, it's a lot harder because there's just one group, other than like nationals, but it's all high level.
Right.
And so when you're a lower level 15s team and you're playing most of the time against 16s teams and upper level 15s teams, there's not a lot of encouragement for those kids. There's a lot of losing. And you can learn through that too, but it's also important to experience some victories.
True.
And so when you recognize kids like that at these lower levels, that gives them the hope to say like, hey, we're not bad. And so what's great is, I can use for my own club, I had a 15 threes team this year that they won the lower level division, silver division, and that pushed them that they ended up twice beating our 15 twos team. They ended up winning 4 tournaments.
Oh, wow.
Every single player on that team is passionate about volleyball. And some of the things that helped were the all-tournament team, and at the end of the year, the all-region team and things like that. And it doesn't really cost the region much at all to do something like that, but it means the world to those clubs, and especially the smaller clubs, to have that kind of stuff happen. To be completely honest, I didn't really want to be on the board.
Right.
With 5 kids and things, life is busy. But with some changes I've seen in the region over the last couple of years, with a lot of stuff with JVA and things like that, I've just seen a lot of misinformation out across the area, and I've seen a lot of people making things supposedly about families, but the reality is it's about money. And so I've heard a lot. I heard a lot of like, getting away from USAV is going to save you so much money.
Right.
And what I've seen happen is the price of tournaments have not gone down. The price of clubs have not gone down.
Right.
The price of anything has not gone down. So it hasn't transformed any club into savings. And at the end of the day, if it's supposed to be about the families, then an important piece to me is safety, training, things like that.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier that I always say it's better to be under authority than having no authority. And do any of us really want to be under authority and have accountability? No, we want to just do things our way. Yeah. But I guess for me, I would rather have all of my parents and all of my athletes know that my coaches are getting properly trained and it's not just an option.
Right.
That my coaches are all getting properly background checked. That all of my players and parents are getting properly trained to officiate and things like that. There's nothing more frustrating than to, whether it's, my kids playing soccer, going to volleyball, when you have officials that don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so there's so many layers and pieces to it. Yeah. And so I think the easy thing to do is to always just walk away when things get difficult. We see that all the time in our world, whether it's whether it's a marriage, quitting school, things like that. It's easier for people to just walk away. Yeah. And so for me, it's easy also to just complain from a distance about all the things we don't like about the region or we don't like about USA Volleyball. And so for me, I guess I hit the point where it's like, okay, well, I can continue to have my opinions on things that could help, or I could actually take a step and take a stand and be involved. And so, after talking with Laura and talking with Mark and things like that, and just seeing, for them that I really feel like it is about the kids and in the safety of the kids, that's kind of what motivated me to be a part of it. And unfortunate reality is I'm sure there's going to be some club directors when I, because I've continued to say, like, these are the reasons why USAV is the route we should go. I'm sure there's going to be directors that say, well, you're only saying that because you're part of the board. And so that was kind of a drawback where I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be a part of the board, so that can't be an excuse. Right. But then when I, talked to my family, prayed about it, it just, I can't let that be an excuse of why I don't get involved. And so ultimately I made that decision where, this is a time to really try to focus on this stuff. And, because I think so many times people, in the past, we see it, a lot of times people get involved for self-promotion. And so to try to show people, like, this isn't about making my club bigger, better. This is really about the girls and and specifically the girls, because that's what my club focuses on. But as we grow boys, to get the focus right from the get-go, and have everything set up and in perspective, and eventually, as I get to know the board and things like that, of getting more men's teams, more women's teams, more adult things back. I know when 20 some years ago when I played USAV men's, there were a lot of men's teams, and now it seems to me fairly non-existent. Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things is if you look at kind of JVA has a spreadsheet out there on the cost differences between the two. And I don't feel, first of all, that it's even close to accurate. But the one thing I really want to look at was what was great for me is, yes, as a club director before, registering all your players was a lot of work. And it used to be, up until a couple of years ago, it was all paperwork. And I was spending weeks hunting down people, like you got to sign 3-4 different times on one form. And it's like, oh, you missed a signature on the back. And so that was a pain. But now that things have transitioned to online, and the biggest thing for me, what I did with this whole transition was, it's really an individual membership. And so I've kind of said, okay, when you look at the cost of what sports are, and you look at a membership as $50, is $50 really that much more to most of these families? No, it's not. So I've had, last year was the first year, I had my parents just, you are responsible for registering your kid, you're responsible for paying, and my coaches as well. And then I think it's a lot easier for them to see that it's an individual membership and the benefits that come with it. And I think even one that you mentioned some great things, but the best thing for me is the art of coaching, where coaches could get on and look at different practice plans and different drills and videos to be more creative with their practices and things like that. Then that helps them to grow as well. And so all those kind of things versus a bunch of optional stuff. Of course, coaches don't want to go through a bunch of training and video training and do it year after year after year. And for me, it's like my kids laugh. They see me down sitting at my desk with the, because every year I watch all those videos, and you're hitting next slide, and they come down, oh, Dad, you're doing those videos again. It's like, yep. And you're like, you can almost replay a lot of what they're saying. You could just repeat it. But I look at it, it's like, if you don't want to put the work in to continually train yourself to be better, then really you shouldn't be coaching kids. Because if it's just about you and what you want to do, I don't want you coaching for me. and yes, I understand it's like it can get boring, it can get tedious, some of the stuff, but it still is making you better and putting things in perspective for you. Because continually you go to tournaments and you see coaches that didn't do the training and they don't know what the rules are, and you know, unfortunately it's important because a lot of coaches coach high school and club, and there's a lot of different rules, and you know, right now one of the things I'm really fired up about is obviously we know there's a huge lack of gym space in the area, and there's a group that has gotten together, and actually out in Rosemount, they're working on building this thing called Hope Fieldhouse. So it's going to be I think about a 42,000 square foot field house that will be able to host basketball, volleyball, adaptive sports, have some training centers, CrossFit training, things like that. It'll be a spot that will be able to host some, you know, USAV events, things like that. And I'm excited because it's the whole purpose of the field house is kind of goes along with what I've been saying of trying to put this stuff back in perspective and have that community feel. And so that excites me. What's really excited me is things that are already happening. I mentioned about the all-region teams and things like that, but even now talking about like rankings and having regional rankings, that excites me because it's fun for kids to be able to look on. It's fun for parents that are at work, not working, looking on, to see like, hey, we moved up 78 spots, you know, things like that. It's fun for parents to see that. It just it's a little added thing. You know, and I think it helps you, again, give that encouragement where it's like, if you're not on the super elite teams, that there's still some recognition to kind of what you're doing. And so that kind of stuff excites me. I'm excited about how much the staff here is trying to get together with club directors and things like that. And of course, the kickback from a lot of these club directors is going to be like, well, they're only doing that because they're losing teams and members, you know, to JVA. It's like, does it really matter? Why they're doing it isn't the most important thing, is that they're choosing to do the right thing. And yes, it might have been some pain to get to this point, but now that we're really trying to go grassroots and invest in each other, isn't that what we're trying to get to? And yes, you know, a lot of times we need some pain to get where we need to be, kind of wandering through the wilderness a little bit. But, you know, to get to where we want to be, we're getting there. And so I like that from the board members I've talked to and from the staff I've talked to, that it seems like everybody wants to work together for benefit of the sport. I would say, you know, when we start talking about the JVA USAV stuff, it's really easy to think, some people think USAV is bad, some people think JV. Most club directors are well-intentioned, and so I don't want people to feel like this is a slam on the JVA. We put some of our teams in JVA tournaments. There's some tournaments that are great. It's about the kids. I just think the better route is that having, again, being under that authority, having that safety, having that protection. And so I would say, you know, thanks to all the other club directors and all the coaches that genuinely are investing their time into kids. Thanks to all the officials that are working hard and doing it the right way. Because of the money that's got poured into sports, everyone has an opinion on everything, and so it's so easy to want to quit being official, quit being a coach, because it's just, you're just like, it's not worth it. Everybody's out. And so, you know, I just say, you know, thank you to the people that are genuinely doing what is right. Don't give up. Don't lose faith.
Yeah.
And for us to to thank you guys as a staff I really feel like, and I've had great relationships with some of the previous staff members before, and so it's not like this is the first time that I've met with staff. I mean, I told her that when Ken Miller was on, I would drive up to Brainerd and meet him for lunch to turn my paperwork in, just to have that connection. Again, you brought that up. Yeah. Connection. We want to be connected, and so thank you for making the attempts to be connected to the clubs, and hopefully for us as club directors, as competitive as we are, we can put some of that aside and always say, like, there's plenty of athletes in our region, enough for all the clubs, that we work together and we genuinely try to do what's best for them.